Hi, I'm Chris, the on-farm network agronomist with the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers. In this presentation, I will go over the results from our pea fungicide trials held in 2024. Mycospirilla blight is also called Ascochyta blight, is our main yield robber and target disease of fungicides in field peas. So let's take a quick look at the life cycle. It overwinters in soil, on crop residues, and on infected seed. In early summer, airborne ascospores are released and travel long distances. Most often, early symptoms appear as freckles on the lower leaves or as ringed lesions in the mid canopy. Over summer, these lesions expand, and secondary infections by rain splash and high humidity moves the infection up the crop canopy. Then after harvest, pea residue, soil, and seed can carry on the disease life cycle. And fungicides are applied around early flowering when these initial infection symptoms are popping up to limit disease spread up the canopy. So with that introduction, let's talk about on-farm trials comparing pea fungicide strategies. And we have two trial types. The first comparing a single fungicide application at flowering versus none, and the second trial type comparing a single fungicide application also at early flowering to a second fungicide application. So two fungicide applications versus one. In 2024, we completed 6 single fungicide application trials that are circled red on the map and 3 double fungicide application trials that are circled in purple. We'll talk more about these trials types separately. So starting with the single application versus none trials, the objective is to evaluate the impacts of a single application compared to none in peas. Will a fungicide application reduce Ascochyta blight disease pressure? Will it move the yield? Will it improve the yield and provide a return on investment? It's been more common in the drier years for farmers to compare a single versus none strategy and asking the question, do I need a fungicide application in a dry year? For the 6 single versus none trials, the products tested were Delero, Cotegra, Zetigo, and Revi Pro, and all of these products were applied at early flowering stage between R2 and R3. And at all sites, there was higher than average rainfall in May and June that year, so conditions were certainly conducive to the disease development. Disease pressure was evaluated in every strip of the fungicide trials, and we're looking at incidence and severity ratings for Ascochyta blight, both foliar and leaf stem infections. We're also looking at white mold, downy mildew, and rust if present. But Ascochyta blight continued to be the most common foliar disease observed in field peas, and it was prevalent at all sites. So we'll just look at that disease here. We rated the trials 10 to 14 days after application, and we were finding symptoms anywhere from small purple freckles on the left, shown on the left on the leaf, and then more severe symptoms on the right, where the disease is moving up the canopy, causing weak stems and lodging. And this was no surprise considering the high rainfall amount we had leading up to flowering. And how did the products do to reduce symptoms of Ascochyta blight? In this graph, on the vertical axis on the left is the disease rating severity scale of 1 to 7, where 7 is most severe symptoms and 1 is least severe symptoms. And on the bottom of the graph are the different trials, each with a pair of light and dark colored bars. For these paired bars, the lighter colored bar on the left is peas with no fungicide or untreated, and on the right, the darker bar is peas with a single application of fungicide. And we did find moderate to severe Ascochyta blight at all sites. And then the results are across all products tested, the single fungicide application provided a slight reduction in Ascochyta blight severity at 5 of the 6 trials, and they are highlighted here with the blue arrows. And then with regards to yield, there were no significant yield responses to a single application of foliar fungicide applied at flowering in peas in 2024. Therefore, a loss in profit of around $15 to $20 per acre occurred, and that was the cost of the product, not including the application costs as well. And then the second fungicide trial is comparing 2 applications of fungicide versus 1. The questions we're looking to answer are, will a second application reduce disease pressure, and will it provide a return on investment? So in the wetter years, it's been more common for farmers to compare single versus double applications, asking the question, do I need that second application to protect and maintain pea yield? So at the 3 double versus single trials, we tested Acapella plus ReviPro to Acapella alone, Delero plus Zetigo to Delero alone, and Moravis Neo to plus Delero to Moravis Neo alone. And again, we rated the plants for disease 10 to 14 days after the second and final application. And the sites did receive lots of rain 2024 prior to flowering, leading to humid soil conditions and good growing environment for the disease to develop. In these trials, the first fungicide application is made at all sites and on all strips at the R2 stage. And then the second application was made only on the double fungicide treated strips 10 to 14 days later around R3 stage. And again, at all of these trials, there was higher than average rainfall in May and June. And across all products, we saw a reduction in foliar severity of Ascochyta blight in 2 of the 3 trials. So that's 01 and 08. With the double application compared to the single application, ratings were even between treatments at the 3rd trial, so that's 09. But we saw no significant yield responses in 2024 for a double application compared to a single application. As a result, a loss in profit occurred in the double application area of the trial, equivalent to the cost of the product. Again, this is the product cost only, not including the application as well. And it's a bit hard to say exactly why there were no yield responses to pea fungicides in 2024, considering the wet conditions we had in June, prior and during flowering, because this is certainly not what we would have expected. We simply don't have a concrete explanation, but I do have a couple of thoughts. We did have severe lodging at several trials, and this may have reduced fungicide coverage lower in the lower canopy, reducing the effectiveness. And at the single versus none trials, perhaps the single application was not enough to provide control past the efficacy window for the longer lasting humid conditions, and more applications, say 10 to 14 days after the initial application, were required to see a yield response. But that doesn't really help us explain the lack of response at the double versus single trials. And I guess just because we see symptoms doesn't mean we will always see a yield response. We simply won't see a yield response to fungicides each and every year on every field consistently. But we do know fungicides work and can potentially provide a return on investment in those high risk, high disease pressure years. Lastly, a few field pea fungicide use recommendations. So in late June and July, or stages V10 to R2, scout the field peas for freckling symptoms of Ascochyda blight in the lower canopy. If there is no disease and it's dry, you may be able to hold off spraying. Fine-tune your decisions using the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers Fungicide Decision Worksheet to assess the disease risk. And finally, with fungicide timing, fungicides are most effective as a preventative measure. So it is important to make applications at the early stages of infection and at early flowering. And this is to contain the disease in the lower canopy. If symptoms do not move beyond the lower thirds of the plant canopy by flowering stage, large yield losses would not be expected. If you're interested in learning more about these results, every trial result is available on the On Farm Network database available at manitobapulse.ca or by following this QR code on the screen. If you're interested in participating in an on-farm field scale trial, please contact me. Thanks for listening today. I've been Chris, On-Farm Network agronomist. Follow us on social media or look at our website.